Kan Hyun was an ordinary Korean guy who suddenly gained worldwide fame thanks to his culinary skills. Kan Hyun graduated from one of the most prestigious culinary schools in the world and won the international cooking competition in Paris, leaving all his rivals behind. Thanks to this, Kan Hyun gained enormous recognition around the world, and many cooking TV show hosts wanted him to host these shows with them, offering him many contracts. However, Kan Hyun himself never pursued popularity, and he was very stressed by his fans who did not give him peace. Also, because Kan Hyun was so popular, his colleagues put pressure on him, as his popularity distracted them greatly, and they felt that Kan Hyun looked down on them like they were mere bugs. Also, against the background of Kan Hyun's popularity, he had a lot of haters on the internet who strongly criticized Kan Hyun and his dishes, calling them extremely vile. Because of this, many scandalous articles about Kan Hyun appeared on the internet, which told all sorts of unpleasant things about him. Because of all these scandalous articles and people's attitude towards Kan Hyun, he became very depressed and he didn't know what to do about it. Soon Kan Hyun stopped feeling the taste of absolutely any food, and then Kan Hyun decides to go to the doctor, hoping that they can help him. The doctor told Kan Hyun that he couldn't taste food due to extreme stress, and in order to regain his taste, the doctor advised Kan Hyun to get rid of any sources of stress and find a hobby. The next day, Kan Hyun decides to go out of town to explore his late grandfather's old store, where he had long wanted to open his own restaurant. However, Kan Hyun decided that he himself could not cope with this task, and he decided to call his friend with him, who brought him to this place. At first, Kan Hyun's friend didn't even understand why the most famous Korean chef wanted to open his own restaurant in such a remote and deserted place. Having reached the place, Kan Hyun asked his friend to look around as carefully as possible in order to finally make sure that there were no fans or journalists nearby. However, Kan Hyun thought that there were unlikely to be people in such a remote place, and then with a calm soul he headed towards the long-abandoned building. Walking inside, Kan Hyun's friend told him that he should reconsider his decision to open a restaurant here, as he felt that Kan Hyun wouldn't be able to make much money from his restaurant. However, Kan Hyun told his friend that this place was ideal for him, since he wanted to open this restaurant for himself, because for him, cooking was not a way to earn money, but a kind of hobby. Having laid out all the boxes, Kan Hyun's friend suggested taking a break and having a snack, but delivery did not work in this place, and the guys would have to go to the nearest cafe. A few minutes later, Kan Hyun and his friend found the nearest eatery on the map and they both ordered noodles. However, Kan Hyun found the noodles very strange and almost vomited just by looking at his portion. Kan Hyun picked up the noodles with chopsticks and almost all of the noodles ended up in his chopsticks, so he decides to try them. However, Kan Hyun didn't like the noodles so much that he immediately grabbed a salt shaker and demanded that the management of this eatery call him the person who prepared it. Then Kan Hyun's friend also decides to try the noodles, but he found the noodles and sauce to taste quite good. Continuing to eat his portion, Kan Hyun's friend honestly told Kan Hyun that even if you don't think about the visitors, the idea of opening your own restaurant in this place is still very stupid. Kan Hyun said that it was important for him to open a restaurant in a pleasant location with a beautiful and calming view of the mountains and plains. Kan Hyun also told his friend that the mountains and plains are great places to go camping. Soon, Kan Hyun took some things with him for camping, called a driver, and went to the place where he wanted to go camping. On the way, Kan Hyun checked that he had taken the most necessary things with him, which included a camping stove, a Swiss Army knife, sunscreen, a compass and a map. The driver looked at Kan Hyun and decided that he was going to go to the sea, to which Kan Hyun said that he decided to go and set up a small camp in the mountains. Then the driver told Kan Hyun that in this case he should have taken a tent with him, and after some time Kan Hyun asked the driver to stop at the village of Yeonpyeong. However, the driver told Kan Hyun that they don't sell tents in this village, to which Kan Hyun said that he just needed to stop by. Soon Kan Hyun found himself in the village of Yeonpyeong, which he had not been to since his grandfather died. Soon, Kan Hyun reached the house where his grandfather lived, and he decided to clean it up a little, after which he was going to continue his journey towards the mountains. Suddenly, Kan Hyun heard an unexpected creak coming from his grandfather's closet, which suddenly opened. Kan Hyun decided that thieves had broken into the pantry, and he decided to check who was there and drive away the uninvited guests. Kan Hyun prepared to go into his grandfather's storeroom and prepared his steel bag for self-defense. Having reached the pantry, The head of a cat peeked out from the bushes, which continued to meow and rustle the leaves of the bush. Kan Hyun looked at the cat and decided that since the death of his grandfather, even animals appear here much more often than people. Soon, Kan Hyun found himself inside the storage room, and he tried to find the switch to turn on the lights and have a better look around the storage room. However, instead of trying to turn on the light, Kan Hyun walked towards the darkness that beckoned him, and it seemed to him that the inside of this storage room was much larger than the outside. Soon Kan Hyun saw a mysterious glow in front of him, from which came the sound of wind. Having come a little closer, Kan Hyun saw in front of him a huge pit, in which something resembling a star explosion could be seen. Suddenly Kan Hyun fell off the edge of the pit, and at that same second he began to fall down. During the fall, Kan Hyun decided that this was the end of him, and that now he would not be able to carry out his plans. After some time, Kan Hyun regained consciousness, and he found himself in a very strange place, reminiscent of a forest. After Kan Hyun woke up, he immediately stood up because he was very scared by someone licking his hand. Suddenly Kan Hyun saw an animal next to him that reminded him of a squirrel. But Kan Hyun was sure that it was not an ordinary squirrel, since ordinary squirrels do not have such large ears. A couple of seconds later, this animal waved its large ears, finding itself in the air at the same moment. For some time, Kan Hyun watched as the mysterious animal flew further and further away from him. Suddenly, Kan Hyun's attention was distracted by the rustling of nearby bushes, and he wanted to find out what was there. Kan Hyun saw a rabbit's head emerging from the bushes, and then Kan Hyun immediately calmed down. However, after a couple of seconds, the rabbit came out of the bushes, and in front of Kan Hyun stood a rabbit with the body of a professional bodybuilder. However, instead of causing any harm to Kan Hyun, the rabbit put his huge hands behind his back and galloped on. Kan Hyun was very scared of this place and decided that he should leave this place as soon as possible. Night soon fell and Kan Hyun was unable to find a way out of this strange place. At that moment, Kan Hyun remembered the doctor's words that he should go camping. But Kan Hyun was not happy with the fact that he was lost in this mysterious forest. However, despite his stress and lack of taste, Kan Hyun's hunger continued to plague him, and he decided that he should take a break. After some time, it began to get dark outside, and then Kan Hyun decided to collect some wood and make a fire. However, even though Kan Hyun managed to start a fire, his backpack contained nothing except chopped mushrooms, butter, and some spices. At that moment, Kan Hyun remembered that all the food he had besides the mushrooms was left in his stainless steel bag. Then Kan Hyun had no choice but to cook fried mushrooms. While cooking, Kan Hyun decided to add some oil to the mushrooms as he felt that otherwise the mushrooms would taste too bland and unpleasant. Kan Hyun also decided to add a little salt and pepper to the mushrooms to diversify the taste of the mushrooms a little and make them taste a little more pleasant. After a couple of minutes, the mushrooms were ready to eat, but even so, it seemed to Kan Hyun that it could hardly be called normal food. However, Kan Hyun did not have any other products, and then he decided to still try the dish that he came up with. Despite his efforts, Kan Hyun never regained his taste, which made him very upset. Kan Hyun was so angry about this that he simply took the pan with mushrooms and threw it as far away as possible. At this moment, Kan Hyun was so tense that he even had difficulty falling asleep. Kan Hyun just sat by the fire and thought that he was unlikely to be able to return home, since he did not have a map. His phone did not receive a signal, and during all this time he had not met a single person. Suddenly, Kan Hyun was distracted by a loud roar from the darkness, and he wanted to find out what it was. Then Kan Hyun saw several pairs of glowing eyes emerging from the darkness, and Kan Hyun decided that they were wolves. In an attempt to somehow protect himself, Kan Hyun immediately pulled his hand towards his Swiss Army knife. However, when Kan Hyun grabbed his knife, he thought that no matter how hard he tried, he would definitely not be able to fight off a pack of wolves with his useless knife. Suddenly a wolf's face appeared from the bushes, and Kan Hyun decided that now these wolves would kill him and leave him with nothing but bones. Several seconds pass and none of the wolves attack Kan Hyun, so he decides to see what the wolves are going to do now. When Kan Hyun opened his eyes, he saw that there were no wolves in the bushes, which only made Kan Hyun even more wary. Suddenly, Kan Hyun heard from the side of the frying pan he had thrown away how someone was quickly and greedily eating his mushrooms. Turning around, Kan Hyun saw a small animal that resembled a puppy near his frying pan. Having finished all the mushrooms from the frying pan, the puppy sat down on the ground, began wagging its tail and whining questioningly. Kan Hyun looked at the puppy and did not understand how such a small and, at first glance, defenseless creature ended up in this wilderness. Kan Hyun continued to look at the puppy, and he decided that it looked a lot like a Siberian husky. After a few seconds, the puppy finished scratching and he immediately started pestering Kan Hyun for more food. Kan Hyun tried to shoo the puppy away, telling him that he had no more food and that he didn't like dogs very much. However, Kan Hyun couldn't help himself and began cuddling and petting the little puppy, while thinking about why people like dogs in general. While Kan Hyun petted the puppy, he felt that its fur was too rough, blaming it on the fact that the puppy was wild. Soon Kan Hyun noticed that this puppy also had 2 sharp claws, long ears and large fangs. Suddenly Kan Hyun decided that it was not a puppy at all, but a real wolf cub. At that moment, Kan Hyun began to look around, thinking that the mother of this wolf cub was wandering somewhere nearby. Then Kan Hyun imagined how the mother of this wolf cub would come to him, and decide that he was trying to kidnap her cub, after which she would immediately devour Kan Hyun. With a feeling of intense fear and the absence of any hope of salvation, Kan Hyun simply lay down on the ground and began to await his fate. Kan Hyun believed that he would die sooner or later in this wilderness, and from what exactly? From hunger, cold, or the risk of being eaten, it was just a matter of time. Suddenly the wolf cub began to drag Kan Hyun aside, and Kan Hyun decided that he was dragging him to his lair, where the wolf cub and his relatives would eat him. However, a minute later, the wolf cub dragged Kan Hyun to a strange cave, from which a very bright light emanated. Kan Hyun looked at the cave and decided that it was very similar to the very hole through which he ended up here. Kan Hyun suggested that if he went into this cave, then perhaps he could return to his world. Before going through the cave, Kan Hyun thought that this hole led even deeper, and he decided that through this cave he would end up in hell. Then Kan Hyun began to think about how he should check where this cave leads. While Kan Hyun was thinking, the wolf cub accelerated slightly and ran towards Kan Hyun, thereby pushing him into the cave. While Kan Hyun was falling into this pit, he was thinking that now he would definitely die because of this small wolf cub. However, when Kan Hyun stopped falling, he found himself again near his grandfather's pantry. At this moment, Kan Hyun was very happy that he not only survived falling into this cave, but was also able to return to his world. Kan Hyun was also very sorry that now he wouldn't even be able to thank the wolf cub who brought him to that cave and pushed him there. Then Kan Hyun promised himself that he would never forget the wolf cub and his kindness, even though they would never see each other again. However, a second later Kan Hyun saw a wolf cub wagging its tail at his feet, which helped him return to his world. After that, Kan Hyun decided that it was indecent to leave someone who helped him return on the street, and then Kan Hyun took the wolf cub and took it to his home. First of all, Kan Hyun decided to thoroughly wash the wolf cub, but during washing the wolf cub shook a lot, thereby splashing almost the entire bathroom. After washing the wolf cub, Kan Hyun decided to give the wolf cub a temporary name until he decided what to do with it next. After Kan Hyun chose the name Cake for the wolf cub, he immediately went to bed, and Cake fell asleep with him in the same bed. The next morning, Kan Hyun woke up and felt a strange sensation that he had not felt for many years. Kan Hyun felt like he had gotten a good night's sleep for the first time in a long time, and he couldn't remember the last time he had gotten enough sleep. After Cake also woke up, Kan Hyun decided to try feeding him dog food. Kan Hyun suggested that if wolves are very close to dogs, then Cake should calmly eat dog food. However, Kan Hyun's hypothesis turned out to be wrong, and Cake never wanted to eat dog food. Kan Hyun then decided to try feeding Cake cat and rabbit food, but Cake didn't want to eat either of these types of food. Kan Hyun told Cake that if he doesn't eat enough, sooner or later he will simply die of hunger. Then Kan Hyun decided that over time he would understand what he needed to feed Cake. After some time, Kan Hyun prepared several different dishes for breakfast. Before he started eating, Kan Hyun hoped that the taste would at least gradually begin to return to him, and he hoped that now he would be able to taste at least some food. However, before Kan Hyun could start breakfast, Cake immediately began to eat Kan Hyun's breakfast. At first, Kan Hyun wanted to scold and punish the naughty wolf cub, but almost immediately Kan Hyun drew attention to Cake's behavior. Kan Hyun noticed that Cake immediately eats the food that he prepared himself, but Cake pays almost no attention to the food that Kan Hyun bought at the store. This surprised Kan Hyun very much, since Cake began to happily eat the stewed tofu that Kan Hyun prepared, but he didn't even look at the store-bought chicken. Then Kan Hyun decided to conduct a small experiment to understand how Cake chooses his food. First, Kan Hyun cooked 2 identical steaks, and both pieces of meat were the same size and degree of doneness. However, one of the pieces was covered with a regular sauce from the store, while the other piece of meat was covered with a sauce that Kan Hyun developed himself. Kan Hyun wanted to know which steak Cake would want to eat first to see if Cake was a true gourmet. First, Cake decided to sniff each piece of steak to see which piece would be tastier. Kan Hyun watched Cake with interest and thought that if he did eat a steak with his signature sauce, then Cake would turn out to be a real gourmet. After a few seconds, Cake began to slowly and confidently eat the steak, which was covered in store-bought sauce. However, right after Cake finished the first steak, he immediately began sniffing the second steak, which was covered in Kan Hyun's sauce. At that same second, Cake began to quickly and greedily eat the second steak, and Kan Hyun was finally convinced that Cake was a real gourmet. Kan Hyun also realized that he was unlikely to be able to feed Cake anything, and that now he would have to cook for Cake the same food that he eats. Thanks to Cake, Kan Hyun felt for the first time in a long time the real pleasure of preparing delicious dishes for someone who would be happy to eat his food. After a short breakfast, Kan Hyun decides to decorate his grandfather's house a little, and the first thing he decides to do is paint the outside of the house. While painting, Kan Hyun runs out of green paint and decides to grab another can of paint. However, while painting, Kan Hyun noticed that the color of the new paint was very different from the old paint. Hyun's house and woke up the sleeping Cake. Kan Hyun noticed a stranger, who told him that he used interior paint that should not be painted outside. This stranger turned out to be a local man who continued to express his dissatisfaction with the current youth to Kan Hyun. Soon the man gradually calmed down and told Kan Hyun that he was the headman of this village, and that usually new residents go to him first. Hyun's painting, from which he concluded that Kan Hyun had never painted before. After this, the headman turned his attention to Cake, and he decided that it was Kan Hyun's pet, and Kan Hyun decided not to tell him that it was a wolf cub, and he told him that it was his little dog. After this, the village chief told Kan Hyun that he should not paint the house alone, and that he would call a person for Kan Hyun to help him. Kan Hyun tried to explain to the headman that he could handle it himself, but the headman continued to insist that there were enough skilled people in the village, and among them there would certainly be someone who would help him. The village chief also told Kan Hyun not to make any plans for the weekend, as he was going to find someone in the village to help him paint the house. In the end, Kan Hyun decided not to argue with the headman, since he believed that this headman was an extremely irritable person who was very difficult to argue with. That same weekend, the elder brought a young guy named Young Min Ho, who was the son of one of the local farmers, to Kan Hyun's house. Kan Hyun was somewhat surprised that this village chief had actually found someone who was willing to help him paint the house. After some time, the headman and Min Ho began to work hard on painting Kan Hyun's house, who brought them a glass of refreshing lemonade. Kan Hyun looked at the headman and Min Ho from the side and did not understand why these people put so much effort and waste their time on him and his house. Later, the headman found out that Kan Hyun plans to open his own restaurant in this house, and he asked Kan Hyun what kind of food he would have here. And at first Kan Hyun said that there would be an Italian restaurant here. Later Kan Hyun said that it would be a Western restaurant, which caught Min Ho's attention. Hearing that there would be a Western restaurant in the house, he asked Kan Hyun if they would serve pork cutlets there. A few minutes later Kan Hyun, along with the village chief and Min Ho, went into the house to take a short break, and Min Ho said that he and his wife just loved pork cutlets. Also, Min Ho said that his wife was pregnant, and the restaurant where he and his wife ate pork cutlets closed, and they couldn't travel far, so Min Ho tried to cook the pork cutlets himself. Then Kan Hyun thought about the fact that he initially did not plan to add pork cutlets to his menu, despite the fact that they are easy to prepare. At this moment, Kan Hyun thought that it would be a very strange idea to add a dish to his menu that he doesn't even know the taste of. After a couple of seconds, Kan Hyun looked at Cake and decided that maybe he should really try to cook something like that. At that same moment, Kan Hyun stood up from the table and told Min Ho that he could cook pork cutlets for him and his wife. Hyun also told Min Ho that he now really wants to bring back Min Ho's memories of the times he and his wife ate pork cutlets. That evening, Kan Hyun decided to try making pork cutlets based on how Min Ho described their taste. Min Ho told Kan Hyun that the sauce in the cutlets had a brownish color and a sweetish taste, and Kan Hyun assumed it was tomato paste, but he doubted that a village restaurant would use it. Suddenly Kan Hyun assumed that Minho was talking about ketchup, after which he prepared all the necessary ingredients. Kan Hyun also decided to appoint Cake as his assistant, who should taste his dishes and evaluate them. To make the cooking process a little more interesting, Kan Hyun told Cake that the one who gets tired first while cooking will lose. Soon, Kan Hyun began cooking, rolling the minced pork into cutlets and frying them in hot oil, thereby forming a golden crispy crust. Soon, Kan Hyun cooked the first cutlet and gave it to Cake, but Kan Hyun thought that Cake was wagging his tail too slowly, and he decided that the dish was too sweet. After some time, Kan Hyun cooked several more pork cutlets, changing their frying, the amount of sauce, and much more. However, Cake was still wagging his tail slowly, which only worried Kan Hyun more. After some time, Cake ate a lot of pork cutlets, and each time it became more and more difficult for him to eat new portions. However, this did not stop Kan Hyun at all, and he continued to fry new cutlets, making various changes to their composition. The next day, Minho arrived with his wife at Kan Hyun's restaurant, which had not yet opened. Minho and his wife sat down at the table and started talking about old times while waiting for Kan Hyun to bring them their order. Minho was very pleased to look at the happy face of his wife, who was very happy that for the first time in a long time she would finally be able to taste pork cutlets again. A few minutes later, Kan Hyun brought Minho and his wife one serving of pork cutlets each. Minho's wife really liked the pleasant aroma of the cutlets, and couldn't wait to try them as soon as possible. Minho's wife took a fork and knife in her hands, cut off a small piece of the cutlet, dipped it in the sauce and tasted the piece. Kan Hyun and Minho waited for Minho's wife to swallow a piece so they could ask her what the pork cutlet tasted like. Soon Minho's wife said that these pork cutlets were much tastier than the ones she had eaten before. Minho's wife said the sauce was very similar to the one at the closed restaurant, but the cutlet itself was juicier and crispier. Kan Hyun was very pleased to hear Minho's wife praise his pork cutlets. Later, Minho's wife reminded her husband of how they went on their first date together. Then Minho and his wife ordered pork cutlets, and while his wife was eating them, Minho himself just sat and looked at his wife with pleasure. Also, Minho's wife said that on that date, her husband was so excited that his hands were constantly shaking, which made Minho himself very uncomfortable. In addition, Minho's wife said that before this date, she didn't really like pork cutlets, but after that date, they became her favorite dish. After all these thoughts, Minho's wife thought that perhaps it wasn't even the cutlets, but the memories they gave her and her husband. While Minho and his wife were happily eating the cutlets, Kan Hyun decided to check what was wrong with the Cake. At this moment, due to severe overeating, Cake could not move, and Kan Hyun decided that he had overfed him too much today. However, despite his fatigue and Cake's condition, Kan Hyun was very pleased with the work he and Cake did. That evening, Kan Hyun began creating a new menu for his restaurant. Then Kan Hyun decided that he didn't have to make only Italian food, and that he would create a menu based on the desires of the customers. Despite such a good idea, Kan Hyun decided that visitors to such restaurants only come there by appointment, and such restaurants have very high prices even for the simplest dishes. While Kan Hyun was thinking about the menu for his restaurant, he noticed that something was wrong with Cake. Kan Hyun thought that Cake had some kind of depression, although Kan Hyun walked and played outside with Cake every day. Suddenly Kan Hyun decided that Cake was simply missing his home, which is why Cake immediately raised his ears and tail up. Kan Hyun decided that such an unusual beast as Cake would be better off where he came from. When Kan Hyun thought about bringing Cake back into his world, he also thought that the house would be quite empty and boring without him. At the same moment, Kan Hyun remembered those unusual animals that he saw in that world, which is why he suddenly became afraid to return to that world. Kan Hyun was so scared to even think about that world that he decided that maybe he shouldn't return there with Cake. However, Cake really wanted to return to his world at least for a while, and he immediately began making eyes at Kan Hyun. Kan Hyun tried not to pay attention to Cake, but Cake was not going to stop, and with every second his face became cuter and cuter. As a result, Kan Hyun could not withstand such emotional pressure, and he and Cake nevertheless went to that mysterious world. Despite Cake's joyful cries, Kan Hyun was still scared to be in this place, and he decided that the sooner he and Cake finished this, the better. For a while, Kan Hyun simply followed Cake, who seemed to want to show him something. Suddenly Cake ran away somewhere through the bushes, and Kan Hyun decided to follow him, and soon he heard the sounds of water. Walking through the bushes, Kan Hyun saw in front of him a very large and beautiful lake, from which he simply could not take his eyes off. While Kan Hyun was looking at the lake, Cake ran to the water to drink a little. A couple of minutes later, Kan Hyun told Cake that he would soon return to his world, but despite this, he could not leave Cake without a gift. After a couple of seconds, Kan Hyun took out a large roasting pan, which is often used by TV cooking show hosts to cook meat. After that, Kan Hyun took out several pieces of selected marbled beef from his bag and told Cake that for his help with pork cutlets, he wanted to treat him to really expensive meat. The Cake was excited to see the pieces of marbled beef, and he couldn't wait to try what Kan Hyun would cook for him. Kan Hyun heated up the fryer, took out pieces of beef and prepared to fry the meat, adding various spices to it. Soon the steaks were ready, and Cake immediately began to gobble up pieces of meat one after another. During the meal, Cake was wagging his tail so quickly that Kan Hyun even thought that Cake was about to fly away. Later, Kan Hyun started looking at the lake again, and at that moment he felt like he was missing something at the moment. After rummaging a little in his bag, Kan Hyun pulled out a can of cold beer. Kan Hyun believed that no matter what world he was in, as long as he looked at a beautiful lake and smelled the smell of grilled meat, beer would always be a good compliment. A second later, Kan Hyun opened a can of beer and took his first sip, even though he still couldn't taste anything. However, even this did not upset Kan Hyun at all, since he believed that people drink alcohol not because of its taste. Suddenly, next to Kan Hyun's neck there was something very sharp and cold, which very much reminded him of a blade. Suddenly, Kan Hyun heard a voice behind him that told Kan Hyun that he did not look like a local resident, and that he was holding some unknown artifact in his hands. The stranger standing behind Kan Hyun began interrogating Kan Hyun, trying to find out who he was, where he was from, and how he ended up here. However, the situation seemed extremely nervous and turbulent to Kan Hyun, which made Kan Hyun unable to say a word. Hyun's head was only filled with the thought that he had never thought that someone would ever hold a sword near his neck, and then Kan Hyun told the stranger that he was a cook. At first, the stranger did not believe that Kan Hyun was actually a chef, and he wanted to find out from Kan Hyun why he came here. Kan Hyun told the stranger that he just decided to have a small picnic near the lake and look at the beautiful views. However, the stranger did not believe Kan Hyun, and he said that an ordinary cook would not be able to pass through the forest, which was exclusively inhabited by various demonic entities. After this, the stranger told Kan Hyun that if he did not explain to him who he was and how he got here, he would cut off his head. A second later, the stranger saw Cake not far from Kan Hyun, who continued to eat his portion of meat. At that moment, the stranger looked at Tortik with such a frightened look, as if he saw someone very majestic in front of him. Meanwhile, Kan Hyun began to poster out of fear and tell the stranger that he would do anything for him, that he would finish and give him all his money if he let him go. After a second, the stranger put his sword away, apologized to Kan Hyun, and told him that ordinary people rarely come here because of the demonic beasts, so he thought that Kan Hyun was somehow suspicious. After this, the stranger once again apologized to Kan Hyun and introduced himself as Knight Randolph. Kan Hyun was somewhat surprised by how quickly this knight switched from threats to normal conversation, after which Kan Hyun also introduced himself to Randolph. After this, Randolph told Kan Hyun that since the mythical white wolf is with him, he cannot be an evil person. However, Kan Hyun did not understand what mythical white wolf Randolph was talking about, which surprised Randolph himself. Randolph then explained to Kan Hyun that white wolves are the direct descendants of the ancient wolf god. Myths say that the wolf god was very wise and had the ability to see good and evil in human souls. It was also believed that the white wolf race inherited from the wolf god the ability to see the good and evil of any person. Randolph said that this wolf cub was a member of the white wolf race, which indicated that Kan Hyun was not an evil person. At that moment, Kan Hyun understood why Cake was behaving so unnaturally for an ordinary wolf cub. After that, Randolph looked at the lake and told Kan Hyun that places like this could really brighten up any picnic. After a second, Randolph looked at Kan Hyun's plate and said something he had never seen in his life, and Kan Hyun told him that it was regular beef, after which he invited Randolph to try his meat. Randolph told Kan Hyun that he had not had lunch yet and that he would not refuse such an offer. Randolph began to look at the meat and think that he had come here to deal with Kan Hyun in the first place, but he would be stupid not to try his food. Randolph told Kan Hyun that he would try just one piece, and Kan Hyun looked at Randolph's face, which reminded him of the expression on the face of a hungry cake. After a couple of seconds, Randolph took a piece of beef from the plate and slowly began to eat it.